really, really crooked. All right. Now is it picking me up? Apparently. All right, we're good. Here are the details about the final exam. December 14th, 1:30, in the gym. 125 questions. But it's out of 120 because the powers that be decide they're going to give you 5 bonus questions. That means that if you've messed up a little bit there, but we're not telling you which ones are the bonus questions. In other words, there's 125 questions, you answer them, and the best score you can get is 120. Therefore, if you end up getting 125 right, which I don't expect from anybody, but Murphy's Law has happened once in my life, you're not getting more than 100%. But we're using those 5 questions to top you up, so that it should, possibly give you the option for a slightly better grade. Overall, it is a Scantron closed book exam. Bring some pencils; they're going to be handy. Bring a really good eraser because the new Scantron machine apparently is anal retentively picky, and it will sometimes accept the wrong answer. So before you go nice and dark, be certain. Because the way those Scantron machines work, and if you don't know this is a heads up. For example, you do this. You go, oh, I'm sure the answer is B. Then you go, oh crap, right? And you erase it and it's a little dirty. And it's actually B. Scantron, if it gets picky, it'll pick this one first because it reads left to right. So just be sure before you mark it really dark that you're sure about your answer. Apparently it's not quite as picky on the student's sheet as it is on the teacher's sheet for some unknown reason. I don't know why. No, the answer sheet's the same sheet as you guys. But some unknown reason, when it's marked as answer sheet, it's extra picky. There's a little radial circle. Oh, by the way, and I know on the fact, on those blue Scantron sheets, there's a little section that says answer sheet. You scratch that off, that's an automatic 0. Why? Because at that point the system tries to override my answers.
Yeah. Seems good.
Yeah. Then they give me my results 2 days later. Then I have to go and exclude that exam and it's submitted for grading a second time. And it's not going to be a good scene. Because by then my grades are due. So Dan will be crusty. I'm usually not very crusty, but that would make me pissed off. Okay, now I'm just going to do a quick once over on this. And actually I'm going to do a reverse review this time. Because this review document is actually pretty darn detailed of what you need to study. What we'll do is make sure you review this by Monday, and I'll do a Q&A on Monday about anything you're not sure about what you're studying. If we review this, and if there's anything in here that when you look over your notes that you're not comfortable with, then we'll do a Q&A style review instead of me saying, by the way, read chapter 2 and these are the topics. Saif took the time to write them all out in detail.
Monday.
I mean, not Monday, I mean next Thursday. Sorry, I've got Monday and Thursday mixed up. I've had a really crazy week.
How are the marks broken down? For lab and...
Oh yeah. Yeah, I finally put up the CSI for you guys. And I put up the course outline for you guys. Congratulations, I didn't even notice if you didn't even have one. All right. The breakdown is as follows. Course outline. Did it just pop up over here? All right then. Where's the mouse? Scroll, scroll, scroll. This is theoretically we're supposed to learn. Keep going. There it is. Okay. I'm going to kill this light so it's brighter for everybody, nice and clear for everybody. All right. Now, labs are 10%. Quizzes and tests are 10%. Now, because the software we use to create these, we have a few limitations on what this used to be freeform. We could type whatever the hell we wanted, and the system accepted it. Now they've decided to make official categories, which you can imagine how well that works. Tests and quizzes is hybrids. Assignments, those are the two assignments, 10% each. The midterm exams, those are test 1 and 2, 10% each. Final exam shows 40%. That's your practical plus your written. The written portion is 20%, the practical is 20%. So in the offhand chance you're one of the ones that fall into the bin of the practical didn't go so well for you, but you're really good at memorizing, don't abandon hope. Because you can make up for it. Because the way we do it is we take the 20%, no marker, the 20%, I was about to start writing on that. The 20% for the written, plus the 20% for the practical, and that ends up being the 40%. So let's say you ended up with 30% on your practical, and you end up with a 60% on your written, you'll probably end up around a 50, thereabouts, roughly. Because you take this, that's worth half of that, so you take the percentage of this being half of that, so that'd be 15% plus 30% is 45. Okay, that's a bad example, but you might want to hit a 70 if you got a 30 in practical. There you go, that'll give you the 50. Right, so you hit the midpoint between the two, that'll be basically your grade. So that's your target. And the math is fairly easy. I mean, if you got 10%, you want 90. If you got 20%, you want 80. 30%, you want 70. 40%, you want 60. Then, 50, 50, 50, there you go. It'll just balance out. Or if you got, 90% here, that means you don't need to pass the written exam. But the rule is you have to show up and at least circle something. Just saying, some people have decided not to come to the final exam. And that is now an official. Up till this year, I'd let people get away with it if they were going to pass. Yeah, your grade would go from an 80 down to it. Actually, if you had a 90 coming in, you skip the final exam, your grade go from a 90 down to like a 68 or 70. But you still passed. You just decided not to do the final exam. Apparently, in 82, which was the course that this merged with, written exam was a requirement. Therefore, you don't show up. If you get a 0, and you fail. And it's a fail incomplete. Catch is we don't let you redo the exam. So, you can't say, oh, I forgot to come in, or I was sick, or whatever excuse you can come up with. Weeks ahead of time when it is. And it is the responsibility of the student to show up for their final assessments. And if you can't show up for your final assessment, especially like your written exam, probably want to give us a really good heads up and a really good excuse why.
Surgery.
Planned surgery. My wife is giving birth. Insert reason here. But that's how it goes. So that's that. We're just going to go flip back to the review document for real quick. That's not the important part. All right, you want to review chapter 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7 from Hoffer. That's the one book. As you can see, there's no review from the other textbook. That's paid for. Labs 2 through 9. Now, for you guys, it's kind of a mess because you have a hodgepodge of labs. Still look at labs 2 through 9 because those couple of labs apply to the other people.
So the ones you posted.
Now, mine 5 and up are really good to know. And from before, I think 3 and 4 might have been like design labs. I really don't know what those labs were, so.
So if we know your labs, we should be good.
You should be fine. Assignment 1 and 2, obviously I didn't do the first assignment, but that first assignment applies because it applied to half the group, so it still applies. And then my assignment 2, so just make sure your SQL skills are up to date. There are SQL questions on there, but they're not, pick up the wrong SQL statement kind of thing. It's more along the lines of what is this SQL statement going to do? Like it's an understanding question, not a syntax question. Yeah,
The assignments were worth 20%, so if they broken down
10 and 10.
10%.
At least that's how I'm splitting it. Tests 1 and 2, and I'm going to be hitting the checkboxes so that as soon as I've got the one person that has an exemption is cleared, so you can see the answers you submitted and the answers you answered correctly or incorrectly. Ditto for the hybrids. I'll be hitting switch on that soon for you guys to look at, obviously by the end of this week, which is we're almost there now. Yeah, Saif did a really good detail. He says, bring at least 3 pencils. Since the detailed instructions before. It's great. Bring a good eraser, a pencil sharpener, pen, and a watch. Your cell phone cannot be used as a watch. Yeah.
What about smartwatches?
Don't know if you should do that.
Yeah, you know, I'm having an issue with that because that's a question that nobody's ever asked.
We've been told some of our other ones can't.
No sign, but the other prof said no way.
Some of the-
Yeah, okay.
Some of the other props have said.
No smartwatches. Unless you get yourself a handy little Casio, you know, or Timex or whatever. And I don't mean the Timex smartwatch either, because the Timex smartwatch sucks. Yeah, no smartwatches, just a regular watch. That's to keep time because you're guys in the gym, so you don't have a clock like you normally would. And we can't put a big display with a timer because there might be another group mixed in there. So unlike when I normally work here, we put a timer up on the wall so you guys can, you know how long you've got left. So take a watch so you can keep track of your time. Okay, chapter 2. There's 29 questions for chapter 2. Reread these items and then you should be good. Chapter 4, there's 22 questions on chapter 4. 30 questions about chapter 5. By the way, the 22 questions for chapter 4, I wrote about 8 of those. And then they were rewritten on me. 30. Chapter 6 and 7, there's 14 questions on SQL. So, apparently my questions were too vague and difficult. My questions are too challenging. 6 and 7, there's only 14 questions. 14 questions from 6, 30 from 7, and it's roughly, it's just, do you understand what this is doing kind of thing, more than anything else. He talks about things you should understand. And I think some of this is left over from previously, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. Triggers, I think, just a couple questions about triggers. Yeah?
So is the part on SQL, is it going to be like in the part 2 or second test where it gave you a block of SQL and you had to read it and then it would give you a choice of what the output would be? Is that what that's going to be like?
There might be a few like that. If I'd have a copy of the exam with me, which I don't at the moment, I could flip through it and tell you.
Copy of the exam on you?
I don't. It's on my desk at work.
Sure.
Yes, but there's also questions that lie along lines of in looking at this SQL statement, what would happen, and it's not, you got to pick out the output. It's more or less, a description of what possibilities are. Or it says, if you do this, what kind of output would it get? It shows like a pseudo little table, and if you joined it this way, what would happen, kind of thing. That's the kind of questions that are on there. It's whether or not you understand NVIDIA card. It's only after the first 5 minutes.
I have the same problem.
Right?
I have the same problem.
And yeah, it's what it is, That's how it's going to be, so it shouldn't be too bad. So like I said, I'm going to do what they call a reverse review, which is a little different. I'll get you guys to, over the next week, take a gander at this stuff that's in the textbook and in the slides and in the whatever else. And then next week I'll do a Q&A session instead. Yeah.
Would you be able to unlock the hybrids first to redo?
Yeah, as soon as I put a firm due date on them, which is probably going to be Wednesday. In other words, after Wednesday, I will not accept hybrid solutions anymore because I'll unlock them. So you guys can look at the answers.
Are you opening up the answers, or can we do?
Well, you're gonna be able to. I'm gonna set it up so you guys can do them over and over and over again with all the possible answers shown. But I gotta put a set date first so I can extract your grades as they currently stand on the hybrids. So that being said, if you haven't done your hybrids yet, You know, it's 10%. Might be worth doing your hybrids. Yeah.
Are we technically past the drop dead date? But you haven't really assigned a due date for them. So if we
For the hybrids?
Yeah, if we redo.
There's no official drop dead date, but before test 2 is good to get, hybrids 4 to 7 done.
Yeah.
Hybrids 8 and 9 I dropped for you guys because it just wasn't fair. Were they important? Not really. They were reading assignments, 3 questions. Go read this, answer these 3 questions. And basically put, if you're clever, you can do Control F and find the answers and not do the reading. So, they're, pardon the phrase, filler type.
Which one did you drop?
9 and 10.
9 and 10.
Hybrids 9 and 10.
8 and 9, right? You said 8.
Sorry, 9 and 10.
Because we only have up to 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 8, 9.
Yeah, so you guys only have till 7. Maybe I dropped hybrid 10 altogether. Whatever. Up to 7 is what's important for the exam. So I'll be setting those, once I extract the final grades out of everything, I'll open them up so you can, and I'll send out a message at the approval time so you guys can start doing them over and over and over again. It's a good way to go review what's in the textbook because it's the same material and it covers the same areas as this. All right, so what am I going to do today? Well, since this wonderful document came out, it actually took the wind out of my review significantly because it's more detailed than my review. Yeah?
Sorry, where is it on Blackboard? I was looking for it, I couldn't find it.
I sent it by email
Oh, right. Okay.
to everybody because I wanted it in your hot little hands ASAP. As opposed to when I put it on Blackboard, I can see how many times something's accessed, and I know some people aren't checking things out on Blackboard. It's like I know some people haven't downloaded the textbooks, even though you're doing the work. Don't know how well that's working for you, but
There were PDF copies.
yeah, I know. I gave one out.
There were more than that.
Yeah. What, somebody actually have the proper North American version of that document in PDF? I just got the international edition, which is blue and white, not the green version. Okay, so I'm going to do another couple of triggers, show you guys roughly how that's done. Then, time permitting, I'll do a programming demo. If there's no programming demo this week, I'll do it next week. I got 2, basically, I call them value-added parts. In other words, the program demo is a value-added. And then I got a couple of short little presentations. Depending on time, I'll do one or the other today. All right. This is so brutal. Right in the eyes. I'm glad I'm not 6'2", because as you can see, 2 inches. It's sometimes good being short. Shorter. All right, hold on. I just got to grab. Okay. Now, you guys are somewhat familiar with ThinkCube. And thanks to that, I am going to use, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to use ThinkCube as my example for some of what I'm about to do. I just need to go pull up. One chunk of code here. Nope, not that one. Okay, there we go. So, the example I'm going to use is an inventory allocation. And essentially, the example of this is, when you buy something from Amazon, it shows you there's so many left on hand, right? Mm-hmm. And the way this kind of thing works, and I don't know if you guys actually know how this works in Amazon land or any of these other places, is when you order it, it allocates one to you. It doesn't belong to you yet, but it's been taken out of inventory. So it says we have 22 on hand. The second you hit checkout on your shopping cart and your credit card processing thing works, what it does, it creates what they call an allocation record. So it creates a record attached to your order that says one of these has been allocated. So the next time somebody goes and says, I want to buy, I don't know, this Gargle Flex, And it goes, oh, now there's 21. What it does, it looks on hand minus all the current allocations. Once they put it in the box, put the shipping label on, and it gets put in the pile for FedEx, UPS, or Canada Structure Parcel, the system then marks the allocation as filled. So it takes the inventory, decrements it by the amount of your allocation, and then deletes and clears the allocation. And there's a few different ways you can handle this. So I'm going to use ThinkCube. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an allocations table. I just need to go transition so I can actually see what I'm doing. All right. So I've got a table called allocations I'm about to create. In it, I've got the ID of the allocation, the order line ID, that number should look familiar. The product version ID, hopefully that looks familiar for you guys from the various labs. The quantity, and when was it allocated. At the same time, I'm going to alter the table of product versions and create an on-hand column. Since all my products are fixed size units, in other words, they're sold in units of 1, I'm going to use an integer. Theoretically, if I was a place that sold sugar, I could sell it in 1.1 pounds, 1.2 pounds. The allocation is just the same as always, it's just a different kind of number. So I'm going to create my 2 tables. Done. By the way, I'll be posting this complete example on Blackboard when I'm done.
The Mint could have used this.
Eh?
The Mint could have used this.
Oh, you think? Oh, you mean the guy who was stealing the gold by shoving it up his butt?
Wait, what?
There's a guy who got arrested recently for stealing gold out of the Mint. He was sneaking tiny little ingots to the bathroom. And then he was inserting them.
He got away with this.
He got away with it for 3 years.
How did they catch him?
They could put more metal detectors in front of the bathroom. It's just like everything else. Somebody got greedy.
Yep.
You know, they put metal detectors in front of the bathroom door. You think maybe you shouldn't be trying to walk in with gold? Anyways, so what I just did is just one giant thing, a giant update statement, series of update statements. What I did is just added inventory to all the different products I sell. And I'll just show you guys what that looks like. From like this. And you can see now that on hand, I have available quantities on hand. Some have more, some have less. It's all good. So the next thing I need to do is I want to create allocations. So what happens is when somebody places an order or updates an order, the quantity changes. Therefore, you want to keep keeping track of, obviously, the allocation of the product and that kind of stuff. Now, for now, I'm just going to create this as an after insert. I'm not going to handle the updates because it just gets really complicated. Now, this is a really long trigger, and I'm going to go through it on the screen so you guys can understand what it's doing. Believe it or not, the first time I did this, I typed it all out on the fly. And it only took me 22 tries to get it right. Then I felt like a complete tool, but it was just, I was going through the iterative process. Okay, I'm going to make this bigger. That was smaller, this is bigger. Okay, so it's a standard trigger. I'm declaring 3 different variables: on-hand inventory, allocated inventory, and available inventory. So on-hand inventory is whatever you have on the shelves. Allocated inventory is what you've currently sold but have not shipped. Right? So 22 t-shirts on the shelf, and if, for example, you just order yourself a t-shirt from Shark Robot, and you order the cool little Mario Super Saiyan shirt, and now on the shelf they've got 14 units of it. They're going to grab, you just bought one. Obviously, the second you bought one, there isn't some guy running grabbing that t-shirt the second he's hit checkout. What the system now says is, oh, there's 14 of these in the system, but a dude just bought one. So now there is 13 available for sale, even though we have 14 in the building. That's the one allocated. The available is on hand minus allocated is available. All right. Now this first statement is something you guys haven't seen yet. This guy right here. You see the select into? In here, what this is doing is actually retrieving the on-hand value from the product version for whatever it is I want to buy, and it shoves it into that variable. So you can use the select statement to populate a variable in one step. So you'll select into that variable from there. Boom. Now, if on-hand inventory is null, just as if you remember that first row when I had that, I left it null. I did that on purpose, just so I could show people what happened. Or accidentally show people what happens. If it's null, I'm going to say on-hand inventory is 0. Therefore, if the inventory is null, we can assume there's nothing in-house. Sets it to 0. So right now I'm doing some raised notices. That's similar to when you print to the debug log in Microsoft, like in Visual Studio, or I'm assuming Java apps you can output to a log also of some sort. So that's what the raised notice says. If you know when you look in the in this guy right here, where it says messages, down here, this stuff appears in the messages. So these are debug statements, so you can actually keep track of what's happening. Yeah.
In your if statement, when you're saying if on-hand inventory is null, then on-hand inventory is 0. Is that going to replace the null values by 0 in the table, or
no? Only in the procedure. It's temporarily assigning it a value of 0 because there's no value in the database, so it's assuming there's none. It's just so that there's no errors. It's an error trap. Then what we do is we do a sum of quantity into allocated inventory from allocations. So we're going to go pull the product version ID from allocations, right, and count up how many have been allocated, and we're going to shove it into the allocated inventory. Again, if the allocated inventory is null, assume 0. In other words, it's going to pull this, and if you do a sum of something and there aren't any in the database, it returns a null value, not a 0. This is to handle if it returns a null value. So the allocated inventory is null, therefore it sets it to 0, it means none have been allocated. And I raise a notice again to tell me, by the way, this happened. And I've lost house. All right, so now we do a bit of math. This should look fairly familiar. Available inventory is equal to on-hand minus allocated. We have 14 on the shelf. We sold 1. Therefore, it's 14 minus 1 is equal to 13. Man, that took a long time for people to come up with that piece of arithmetic. Man. So, if available inventory is null, because there's always the odd chance that a null gets crept into the system at this point. Always check for null. Assume available inventory is 0. So then you do a raised notice available so that you know the debugging. Now, if the available inventory is less than or equal to 0, in other words, we have none available, or we're actually asking for more than we have. So we have 14 on the shelf, the guy tried to order 15. Now, a proper system, what it would do is it would create a back order and all kinds of things, but I kept it simple in this case. So it's saying if there aren't enough available to supply the order, it raises an exception. There's insufficient inventory. Done. If it actually makes it past all this, the last line is it creates an allocation for the product. In other words, we know that there's enough inventory. We know that we can proceed. Therefore, we're going to create an allocation for this product at this point in time. And essentially inserts the product version ID, the order line ID, because that's kind of important because we're adding an order line, the quantity, and the current timestamp. Why? Because it's good to know when the allocation was created. And then it returns the new, because we haven't played with the new record, we just did it. Theoretically, we could actually put in system messages on that, allocation ID is this, so people don't need to go search. There's all things you can do. What was that?
We can use the system messages anywhere in any of our SQL.
The raised notice. Yeah, It actually, when you do a raise notice and you're actually using a programming interface, it'll actually come as part of the messages also. For example, in PHP, when you run a query, it'll actually return the results of the query, an error code, or a message. And you can actually extract those messages and actually parse the messages for information to present to the user if you want to. Other databases don't always offer that option. Postgres is extra clever for that. And then you return the record and you end it. So now I'm going to hit run on this. Bang. Okay. I'm going to clear this trigger out of here. And I'm going to create the actual trigger. And for some unknown reason, it's all on one line. That's okay. There it is. Create the allocate trigger after insert and order lines. Therefore, we've successfully added an order line. We're going to decrement our values. Now, I'm going to hit run on this. And I'm going to prove that it works. We'll see. Done. All right, so I don't have any orders like that. So insert into orders, order date, comma, customer score ID, values, now, 123 and employee ID 5. Hopefully this all works. One row. So I create an order. Haven't triggered the order line yet. Like this. So I'm just going to make sure. Okay, we're going to go with 102. So 102's got 74. Hopefully somebody remembers that. I don't remember what order I am using. Okay. Insert into order lines, order underscore ID, product underscore group underscore ID, quantity. Is that all I need? I think so. Values. 72,672, product 102, and we're buying 4. Bang, and hope this works. Go. All right, here's my messages from my debug routine. Right, 74 on hand, 0 allocated, and 74 available, and something went wrong. And that should have worked.
That should have been 70 available.
Yeah. It didn't allocate it. Allocated inventories, no, do this. Oh, no, that's right. Available, 74. Right, no, that's right. I'm just misunderstanding my, there's 74 on hand, 0 were allocated before we did this, 74 are available. I'm gonna run this a second time, and then the numbers should change second time. See, 74 on hand, 4 were allocated, so therefore we had 70 available. So if I run,
when you're running it a second time, that's not gonna create any error because you're asking it to insert something that already exists.
Sure, you can add things to an order more than once. A good order system would actually do an update, but I'm just testing, so you know. I'll do order a product 103. All right, so I've got a bunch of allocations. So if I go select star from allocations. Go. All right, here's my allocations. You can see when they were created. You can see how many I bought, which products they were for, and what order line these were for. This allows you to make sure that when I go to allocate, when I go to release the allocation later, after I've decremented the available on hand, I release the allocation to the correct order. Because what happens if there's 5 orders, and 3 of them ordered 2. And if you're not tracking what order ID it is, you can use the wrong allocation. Therefore, it's better to make sure you target the correct one. That's why these things are in here. All right, so far, we now know how many we have.
So it would be easy to add a min, max, and then trigger on a min.
Yeah,
For another.
there's all kinds you can do now.
Yeah.
Or you could create a function that checks the online inventory, which would be essentially this. This chunk right here would actually be all of this minus, actually you wouldn't need the exception, you just return 0 for available inventory. So you create a function to check your inventory levels for you. Here? Oh, because I'm sitting there highlighting something on my source. If I were to create a function, for example, to actually check my allocations, I just need this chunk, and it would return an integer of either 0 or more. And that's done.
That's also the,
Pardon?
that's also the basis for your products.
It's returning the notices, right?
Yeah, over in the messages here. If I were to, at this point there's no messages because I'm just doing a select. But when I do an insert, it returns, if I do this, there's my notices. So those are like debug messages. All right, so now the complicated trigger. The first one's easy. It's just if it wasn't actually for the raised notices, it'd be half as long. It's all about making sure there's no errors in your data, so that's why it's checking for null, set to 0. If you got rid of all that, the actual logic is like 5 lines long. It's all to make sure that nothing goes wrong code. All right. Now for the adjust inventory code. Now, this one's a little more complicated. Because there's 2 ways of doing inventory allocations, right? Amazon does it the hard way, but obviously they're so big they can afford to do it the hard way. They do inventory control on a line-by-line basis. Because you know sometimes you'll buy 3 things in one shopping cart and they ship 2 one day and 1 the next. So in their case, the inventory allocations are on a per-product basis. With companies, say like Shark Robot or Awesome Tees or those kinds of people that make cool T-shirts, they ship the entire order in one go. They don't do split shipments. So their inventory control system is based on the order. So once the order is shipped, update the allocations.
How is that different from Amazon?
Amazon does on a per product basis.
That would probably be because they have multiple warehouses.
They have multiple warehouses. Like you buy something, someone can be coming from Montreal, Mississauga, or Vancouver.
Okay.
Therefore, they'll, how when you check out and you buy 3 or 4 things, they say try to group my order in as few pieces as possible. What's happening is at that point is it allocates products in this that are in the same warehouse to be shipped. It won't ship you from the closest warehouse; it'll ship you from the one that has the most of everything you're looking for. And they do per item allocations, tracking. So, okay, we just shipped a can of coffee from our Mississauga warehouse. The inventory of Mississauga warehouse -1. Now, if you go with, like the odd T-shirt printing company, they usually have one warehouse
Everything's it.
and everything's in it. And they'll ship the whole order once. So because they can't afford to ship. They're not Amazon. They're not eBay. Even Chapter, I don't think Chapters does split shipments either. They do full shipments. NCIX. I don't know if everybody hears anything from NCIX, but their shipping's terrible. If one thing's not up to date, unless you're a corporation, they won't ship it. They won't do split shipments. They'll do bulk shipments unless you're a company. All right. So what happens is we're updating an order. Order has been shipped, but the problem is the allocations are against order lines, not against orders. So this makes it a little more complicated. Now, if you look here, you've seen integers, but here's something you've never seen before. See an order line record? This is a new data type you guys haven't seen. It's an object type. You're going to be working with a record object. Now, here's what it's doing. The first check it does is says, if new that shipped on is not null, in other words, we're playing with the shipped on, and the shipped on date is different than the old shipped on date. Just, you know, the odd case where we do a shipment because something went wrong. In other words, just making sure that shipped on changed. Now, here's something you guys haven't seen at all, a for loop. But it's not a for loop like a for 1 to 10 kind of job. It's a, did you guys teach you guys anything about, okay, arrays, right? You've learned about arrays, okay?
Yeah.
I don't know if Java has this, but does it have a for each? It does not have for each?
Well, it might in
We
Java,
haven't
we
been
have
taught that.
Okay, every other language I've ever worked with has for each.
We haven't done data structures.
Okay.
We've just done straight arrays.
Right, well, let's say you got a 2-dimensional array, right? 2 columns, 5 rows. And you need to loop through this array. Every language offers what they call a for each. So for each, in this case, for each order line, which is a record in, this is a select statement, it takes that select statement, retrieves it, treats it like a giant array, and it loops through the array 1 record at a time. This is the exact same logic you use when you're programming against a database. So for each record in this, so I'm running this SQL statement right here, and I'm going to every time I loop through the record set, it goes and will assign the next record into order lines. So it's retrieving. So you know when you do a select star from something in PGAdmin, and it shows you this grid with your results? Each line is a record. So it's as if you're looping through that grid 1 row at a time. Here. Now,
So it gets done once you're done going through every row in your select, like your.
yeah, it'll go through every one of those, one after another. It grabs the first one, does something, grabs the next one, does something, until it hits the end. And essentially what happens is, when it hits the end, it returns a false, well, theoretically a false, and therefore it's no longer true. Therefore it bombs out. It's a done loop. So what it's doing now is it's going to go select quantity to allocated inventory from the allocation, right? So order line number 1, we're going to retrieve the first order line out of order, grab the quantity from the allocation. Then we do update the product version, set the on hand to be minus the allocation. So now it's taken off the shelf, it's been put in a box, and the box has been sealed. And then we get rid of the allocation. Now a lot of systems, they wouldn't delete it, they'd actually just mark it as deallocated, so they can have a history of all the allocations, but for expediency's sake, I made it really simple. The allocation gets deleted, so it's out of the system. And then it loops over and over and over again.
Could you explain what's more of this?
Once more?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to put it all up on the screen, like, there we go. So, up here it checks to see if the shipping date has changed. Then what it does is it retrieves all the order lines inside that order. And then it loops through each of the order lines. So 3 order lines, it's going to loop 3 times. For each of the loops, it extracts.
What's your raise notice there doing?
Oh, I'm just tracking the order line ID.
Okay.
So in order line, there's an ID. I'm actually outputting the ID of the order line.
Okay. So it's going to output every single order line ID then.
Yeah, in that order. I'm going to just go over a little bit so you can actually see a bit more what's happening in here. Okay, so select the quantity into allocated inventory because I created a variable up top. So what I'm doing is for each order line, I'm putting it in allocated inventory. The next thing I do is I update product version, set the on hand. Note that I'm decrementing the on hand by the amount that was allocated in the allocation. And then I'm just going to make sure you know where the ID matches the product version ID from the order line, make sure we're hitting the right product. Then we get rid of the allocation, then we loop again.
And then you loop again.
And then you loop again until you're done all the order lines.
Meaning you're going to start from your for loop.
Well, it's going to redo all this. So if you got 3, it's going to do the raise, select the update, and then link one after another. Bang, bang, bang. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Instead of deleting, could you also move it to a separate table?
You could move it to another table. A lot of people will actually, instead of tracking, instead of deleting it, they'll actually have a second timestamp, allocation released on. And then therefore, a bit about the previous trigger I wrote where I checked the allocation, I go select sum of quantity from allocations where allocation released on is null. Therefore, I just grab the allocations that have not been released. But like I said, for expediency's sake, I kept it simple and I'm just nuking it. Source Bain Oxley in the US would shit itself over this. Just saying, you know, in the US, that line's illegal.
There goes your.
You're not allowed to delete data.
Trail.
If it has to do with people's money, or people's privacy, or people's personal information, you're not allowed to delete anything at all for 9 years.
7 years for,
It's if you get audited.
7 years for financial.
9 years in the States for financials. 7 years in Canada. You're not allowed to be audited after 7
Is
years.
it illegal line of code to have that?
In the States, you'd probably be breaking at least 2 laws. In Canada, meh. It depends on what kind of business you have.
Don't do it again.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Come on, guy. Don't do that again.
Especially on camera, I mean, you know.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to create my trigger.
So everything that's looping is in between your loop and end loop, right?
Yeah. So the loop here, this defines the loop and how long it's going to run for. This is the end of the loop, and everything inside of here goes.
Going one by one.
Yeah, one by one. You can actually create a begin and an end block in here too if you actually want to block it. Create by blocks. Really, I don't know why you would, but you can. So this compiled and it ran. Now I'm going to create my trigger. And it helps if I actually put it in the right place. Again, that's for each row that's being updated, and I go. No results, that's always good news. And now I'm going to go. So if I go select star from allocations, this, and go. So here's my 4 allocations I created, like such. I don't remember what order I placed it against, so I'm gonna just go pull that out of there. All right. Two and go. All right, so you can see here, I am missing a column. Notice there's no shift on column, and I really thought I had one on my example. Cool, I forgot to put a shift on column. Okay, let's go alter table orders.
How did it accept your code if you had no shift on column?
The joy of triggers, it doesn't know if it's good until you try to run it the first time. Yeah. It's a bit like, you know, the odd Java program, it'll compile. And then you feed it, I don't know, a negative number and it goes, not allowed to do that.
As long as your syntax is correct.
Yeah, it doesn't know until you try it. I think I called it shipped on, and I'm going to type in this timestamp. And I'm going to go. That's modified. Now, what type order was that? Now I have my shipped on column here. I'm going to go update orders, set shipped on equal to now. And I'm going to hit go, and I hope nothing explodes. All right. And that was great. I just updated the entire database. So if I go select star from allocations, the allocations are still there. That didn't even run at all. Fantastic. My trigger didn't work. So I'm going to go. It's nothing quite like doing a demo and it blows up. Select star from this.
You won't have to rerun the trigger code once it's done, it's done.
You don't need to do it more than once. Underscore on to null. I'm going to re-null it. Go. Now I'm going to try that again. I'm going to see if it actually fires off. And nothing.
One row.
Right?
One row.
Yeah, it updated the row, but it didn't actually put out the messages for this.
Try it twice.
Try it twice. Well, that's pretty much what I just did, right?
Turn it on again and off again.
Turned off, turned on again. Let's go see if my trigger actually exists. Maybe I didn't hit run on the trigger.
Update.
No, it's there. Adjust inventories there. All right. Raise notice, and we go new dot shipped on. And then why am I putting that in this one? All right. Now Dan's debugging, because this is actually what this was working code. Oh. Try that again. And it worked that time. Oh, I hate mysteries. Did I not create my trigger? They should have been bombing out. Cool.
Wait, so what was wrong?
I don't know. Hey, there you go. My allocations worked. The code worked. Now I'm gonna do that again. I'm gonna create a new order. Go grab that from my history. Get my tables. There's my create trigger. I'm gonna create an order like this. Bang. Now I got to scroll through all this again. And I want to go insert into orders, insert into order lines. Bang. And it's going to be one ID higher. 3. I now want to include 6 of those. I'm going to go run. Okay, 6 on hand. In actual fact, I'm gonna test my debugging. I'm gonna say I want 67 ordered this time. I should get an exception. There it is. Insufficient. Insufficient allocated to fulfill the order. SQL state procedures 1, error level 1. So my code works for that. So now if I were to go and
How would you undo something? Like, what if you wanted to just undo one step that you did in your database?
what do you mean database wise, data wise?
Like this statement you screwed up was supposed to be something else. You have to insert that value back into the table again.
There's no undo. Oracle offers sort of undo. It's got a feature for snapshotting and rollbacks. It's kind of special. Yeah. All right, so if we go select star from product versions. Okay, so the one I've been playing with is 102, and you'll see that it's jammed right at the bottom and not nice.
You guys actually see it?
No. 99? Of course not. Okay. Order by ID. Oh, come on. Be nice to Dan. Go. Like that. There's 102. Shows that there's 66 on hand. So now what we need to do is we're going to ship our order. Update orders, set shipped on equal to now, where ID is equal to that. And obviously we got to clean up the rest of this like this. Now we're going to go select star from product underscore versions where order by ID ascending. So I'm gonna update the order. What theoretically should happen? It should clear the allocations and decrement. So right now we know we've got 66. And I go run, and it didn't work. But then I do it by itself, it works. Well, that's really odd. There's our 57. It's the 66 we took off. I think I'm having messaging issues, and I don't know why. If I do this, and now I'm actually, because I'm changing the order shipped on, that's going to keep going down every time I do it. And now we got a null on hand. I got a bug in my code. Never said it was perfect. It's a good example, but obviously it needs some work. I don't know why it wasn't actually. Oh, I know why. Because it deleted the allocations. Then the trigger's firing off. It's not finding allocations, it's setting it to null. And it's updating it with a value of null. So in our trigger, in our happy little trigger here, this bad boy, in here, when we check the allocation, we should be setting that if allocated inventory is null, then inventory and that's the wrong character. If I remember it's end. And we do this. Such. Go. Now, I'm going to copy this, place it there, come back over here, and we're going to undo all this. So I have to go back to my delete. I do this again. Now it should be set to null, and I go select star from. Then it's still null. Somewhere in here, I now have to output all my debugs, my statements and testing. As you can see, it doesn't always work the way you expect it to. How many of you have run your Java program on the first try and it worked? I've never actually robust. Oh, okay.
He's a badass. Ignore him.
Oh, he's one of those guys? Yeah, I write triggers once about every 9 months, so, you know, it gets a little rusty.
My hello world worked the first try.
Yeah, my first trigger worked too. Once we started looping, it got a little more complicated. Update this on hand. Oh, I also should check the on hand and see if it's what's happening. It's what happens when it's null minus 0? No. Null eats all. Right. Yeah, I guess I'm taking Linux, right?
No.
How many of you have seen Linux? How many of you have heard about /dev/null? Yep. Output to null. Output to null. In other words, take this data and make it go away to a place that you'll never see again. A bit like my daughter's bedroom. All right, so I'm going to save this trigger example, and we've already done the first hour. So what I'm going to do is I'll save the programming demo for next week because I don't screw that up as much. What I am going to do though is I'm going to do a couple of quick and dirty little presentations. These ones go real quick. I really hate this new. Browse Google Drive. Open 8215. This. Here we go. Oh, we're going to start with Oracle. Here we go. Oracle. I don't know how many of you recognize Pinhead. There's a reason I picked Pinhead when I talk about Oracle. Oracle sucks. Good, I know what's about to happen. I'm not dumb. Okay. Oracle. Oracle's special. Oracle is the oldest platform database. It was the first. That's why it's got such a big following, let's call it. Is it the best? Pretty darn good at what it does. It's just, Oracle's a little weird. It doesn't behave like what people are used to seeing. Okay. Now, this has changed, this first one has changed recently. The latest version of Oracle actually behaves a little more like other database servers, but not quite. An Oracle database server essentially works in instances as opposed to databases. Now, I don't know if you understand by what I mean by instances. Now, those of us that are past a certain age remember something called a mainframe. A real mainframe. And what happens with real mainframes is that databases are split up, not just that, application is split up and they operate in an instance. In other words, the application runs inside of its own little sandbox. It allocates a certain amount of the CPUs to whatever. And a mainframe doesn't have like, oh, 2 quad-core CPUs. Like they'll have, 100 CPUs. But they're low-powered CPUs. It's just it breaks the work across multiple CPUs. Like if you think about Deep Blue or Watson, those aren't like top-of-the-line processors in those. Those are top-of-the-line reliable processors that always do the exact same thing. They're usually Power PCs. So what happens with Oracle? It works in instances. So you install Oracle on a mainframe, you get one server, one database. However, what happens is when you create a new user, it takes that big database and breaks it up into smaller pieces. So it's creating schemas, sub-databases. Again, you can set up each of these sub-databases in different places. Now, this, like I said, recently has changed and they're behaving more like normal products. But so, actually that slide doesn't even complete, that was just a reminder. So what happens, let's say this room right now is the original instance, and then I create a new user for Justin. What happens now is it takes this room and splits it right down the middle. That's Justin's half, that's the rest of the half. I make a new one for someone else. It'll take the room and divide it by 3, by 4, on and on. It just keeps subdividing the room. Now there's all kinds of options. Say, well, Justin just gets the size of his laptop as opposed to somebody else gets the rest of the room. That's just how it works. So every time you create a new user, it creates a new database for that user. And there's efficiency reasons for this. Used to be that database, like the old servers, you paid for processing time. And for example, one of my old bosses went to school at Waterloo, and when he had to go do his programming assignments, he walked into the room, he supplied his program, and then they time shared it, and then they gave him a bill. Every time he ran his program, they gave him a bill for the number of seconds the computer used to run his program. It was usually 10 cents, 20 cents. Now imagine, when you get that bug that you just can't fix and you need to run it like 100 times. So that's why it worked in instances, so that each piece could be allocated processing-wise individually. Did that just, yeah, no, I didn't. Okay. It has some interesting data types. Varchar doesn't exist. It does, it's been allocated for future use. So instead they created something called Varchar2, as opposed to Varchar, the standard that everybody else uses, because they're Oracle. It's defined by number of bytes as opposed to number of characters by default. So if you go Varchar 25, it's 25 bytes, not 25 characters. Some of you might be thinking, well, what's the difference, right? Isn't one character 1 byte? No. When you need to start inserting those moon runes into the database, they take up an awful lot of bytes. Chinese is anywhere from 3 to 4 bytes. Japanese, ditto. Some of the other languages have more bytes, some have less bytes. That means that, for example, you could create a 25 byte field, you could put in 25 Latin characters in it, or you might only get 6 or 7 Asian characters in. Why? Because of the number of bytes those characters take. So you can tell it you want to go based on number of characters by saying Varchar 250 char. You have to tell it explicitly it's 50 characters as opposed to 50 bytes. For many systems, there's no difference. It's just when you start dealing with international setups, you have to pay attention. Integers are known as PLS integer. I don't know what PLS stands for, but it's PLS. Date time, it has some really nifty features. It has date, timestamp, okay, that sounds familiar for the Postgres people. Interval, you can actually track information based on how long something took. So for example, you could put in a timestamp with the start date, and then you put in the interval of 3.2 days. So it's precise down to the second. So you put down 3.2125 days, and therefore it knows how much time you spent. So it's an interval. It's good for tracking financial transactions. How long did this take to get from here to here? That kind of stuff. All right, they've got some other data types that are special. They got something called raw. It's raw binary data. This is your JPEGs, your MP3s, and that kind of stuff. They have a row ID, which is kind of really cool. It's a hex value that represents the unique address of a row inside the table. It knows that's the physical address of that record in the file. So if you know the exact raw row ID, you can jump to that exact spot instantly. Is it a good idea to depend on them? No, because they could theoretically change. Clr, also known as a text field. Oracle didn't feel that the word text was valid, so they created something called Clr. Character large object. Blob. Oh yeah, I guess I never talked about blobs to you guys. That's why it says been here, done that, because I talked about how much I hate blobs. Blobs only have one purpose in life, and that's to store mixed character sets. If you're storing files in a database, you're a tool. Don't ever do it. Can anyone take a guess why you wouldn't want to store files inside your database?
Takes up a lot of space.
Size is one. Backups are a nightmare. Server crashes are worse. What you normally do is you create a varchar field that has a file name. When the application uploads a file, instead of putting it in the database, you put it on the disk, and then you store just the file name or maybe the path to the file in the database. So, for example, when I first started teaching this stuff, an MP3 file was actually pretty small. Nowadays, people are getting their good old 320 kilobyte files, you know, for the encoding speed, or even better if you're doing a lossless. You know, our cell phone pictures used to be, you know, 1K, you know, 100K. Now they're 4 megs. Let's just say you have a 3 meg file 1 million times. That's a lot of data, and it's all stored in one giant file. So every night you run your nightly backups. 3 megs times 1 million dumped nightly to tape, to offsite, to wherever. It just gets dumped. So every night your backups, instead of being maybe, you know, a file, a database that has a field in it with maybe, you know, 25 characters, you're dumping 3 megabytes per record. So that's an insane amount of data. And if the server blows up for whatever reason and the database file gets corrupted, how easy do you think it is to recover a multi-terabyte file as opposed to maybe, you know, a 100 megabyte file? Just the recovery time is insane. The database backup time is nuts. It's pointless. So don't use blobs. That's the lecture I gave the other guys. I guess I never covered that with you guys. Now you know why don't use blobs. Say no. B file. That's kind of cool. If you don't want to use blobs, Oracle allows you to actually create pointers to a file on the disk. I'm not exactly sure how it works because I'm not an Oracle expert. But you can actually write the file to the disk and then store a pointer to it. So it actually stores the actual inode, if you're on Linux, for example, or the actual MFT record, it tells you physically where it is on the disk. So you can jump to it instantly on the disk. It has XML. That's XML. You guys haven't learned about XML, but it's a data interchange format. Looks like HTML. Well, some of us have seen it, but most of you haven't. Okay, joins. Supports the standard join, left join, right join, all that joins. It also supports the traditional join. The traditional join is the join that Oracle created. helps create. It has a really fun syntax. Some of you have seen this, right? Select star from table 1, comma table 2, where, and the on clause is actually part of the where. But here's a little plus sign. That's a right join. If you want to do a left join, you take this, you put it over here on that side. You actually have to add extra characters on each side of that clause to tell if it's a left join or a right join. So theoretically, you know, I could have an and then forget if it's a join clause and then make a mistake. And poof, the syntax explodes. When I was in school, this is how I learned to do joins, by the way. Because I learned against Oracle 7. And when I did a left to right join, this is the syntax we had to use. It was friggin' nightmarish. Because we also were working with dumb terminals. That, you know, if you don't know what that means you didn't have the clipboard. So you have to retype the entire SQL statement every time, with all the mistakes you'd make every single time. Okay, partitioning. Actually, I covered that with you guys in actually more detail. Partitioning allows you to break up the database into smaller pieces. Oracle has all kinds of cool features for that, where you can put each partition of a table on different disks. So let's say you have instead of using a RAID 5 array, you just have a JBOD array. If you don't know what that is, that's just a bunch of disks hooked up to a controller, and they all live independently from each other. So you could put a really big table and split it up across all the disks. So then when you do a search, it actually asks all the disks one after another, can you give me the data related to this query? And it's retrieving data from 5 different disks at once, therefore the data throughput is significantly higher. You can give each partition its own name, that kind of stuff. Its own storage characteristics. I actually covered that earlier this term. Advanced SQL features. It supports the usual union, intersect, and minus. In Postgres, minus is also known as except. Standard stuff there. Auto increment. So much more fun. It uses a sequence like Postgres. However, you have to use a sequence and a trigger. Why? Because up till Oracle 10.5, I think it was, you could not set a default of a field to a function. So you know how we can create a timestamp default now? You weren't allowed to do that in Oracle. Now you can, but you'd create a sequence like this. So it starts by 1, increment by 1, no max value, it'll just count on to infinity until it runs out of room. And then you got the trigger, create trigger. Before insert on test for each row begin, this looks sort of familiar, right? Except their syntax is a little different. It's actually smart enough to know. Once it keys off begin to ignore the semicolon, still sees the word end. So that's what I mean when it's mostly compatible. Postgres is mostly compatible with Oracle, but not quite. As you can see right here, you're inserting into the new ID, new is lowercase, and they put actually a colon in front of it for some unknown reason. That's just Oracle syntax. But this is fairly similar to what I just showed you guys in inventory allocation. The syntax is a little different, but the concept is the same. So that's how you do an auto-incrementing primary key. You create a sequence, then you create a before insert trigger. You set the value of the ID to the next value from the sequence, and then return new and done. That's it. Okay, that's all I got to say about Oracle, because if you take another course in this program, you learn Oracle more. Other one I want to grab is browse. Okay, Microsoft SQL Server. And then when I say it's like coffee, I don't know how many of you have gotten used to using Microsoft products. Probably not a lot of you. I'm not talking about Windows. I'm talking about their tools. Right? They have one of the best development environments you could buy, bar none. Except for a few weird little quirks, which I don't understand why they don't offer. And some of them have been rectified now, like code folding has now shown up to the party. which is something every other IDE's had for years. The last couple of versions of Visual Studio finally had it. Their server products, once you're used to using them, it's like coffee. You know, you caffeine freaks in the room. You drink that first cup of coffee in the morning, and then the next day, you know, you need that cup of coffee in the morning again, right? This is like this. Once you get so used to using it, you can't give it up, and it's just like, I cut my teeth originally on SQL Server, and when I had to go to a Unix-based server after that, it was really painful. Okay. It's really nice in here, but it only runs on Microsoft platforms for now. I haven't updated the slideshow, because now this should be a surprise, it's coming to Linux. Sort of. It works on there. They have an open beta now, an open alpha that SQL Server now runs on Linux, and it's the same price as the Windows one, but right now you only get about 25% of the features. Basically, you can use the management tools from Windows to manage it, but it doesn't have replication. It doesn't have transaction distribution. It doesn't have all some of the extra features that you normally get, but it runs. And what they've done is, now how many of you have used Linux? How many of you have heard about Wine? Okay, a couple. Crossover games, for example. There we go, the game. I don't want to run Windows, I want to play games, right? Wine is an emulator. It takes Windows application calls, funks them, turns them to the Linux kernel. These guys basically rewrote Wine for themselves. So they've got a funking layer, and it's 98% compatible with Windows API. They're talking low-level API level, like kernel level compatible, not upper level. So they're actually significantly more compatible with Linux. And there's a theory for that too. I'll tell a theory later. Now, it'll run on your desktop, on your typical Windows 10, Windows 7, whatever. But if you need the more powerful versions, you have to have Windows Server. Surprise once again. Now, there's fundamental features. It supports the regular databases, just like MySQL and Postgres. In other words, you set up your instance of the server, then you create database, create database, create database. Each database lives by itself inside the server. Everybody's happy. It has full ACID support, which is a term I don't know if we even taught you guys. Yeah, I don't think that's on the exam either. So, ACID has to do with transactions. Transaction handling. Has full referential integrity, just like Postgres. Full transaction support, like Postgres. In other words, if it has ACID, it has transactions. I might actually put that in note as something to teach you guys next week because it's worth knowing. All right, data types. Full integer support, just like you guys have experienced so far. Full floating point support, and we're talking full-on Visual C++ level floating point, not weird floating point. Full data type support. They have char, varchar, text, but they got the special N version, nationalized. So let's say you have a database where you know for a fact that one day you're inserting English, another day you're inserting Chinese, another day you're inserting Cyrillic, another day you're inserting freaking Australian. It's like English, but it's not. I have an Australian in one of my other sections. He would have loved that line. Essentially, it allows it to handle nationalized characters. So it becomes a multi-byte field. So if you say varchar 50 versus nvarchar 50, it'll actually be able to allocate space properly. Proper Boolean support using a data type called bit on, bit off, same idea, 0 and 1. It has the full date support you'd expect everywhere. They were the first database to support merge joins. They're a little weird, and I barely understand how merges work, so because I've never had to use them because I don't work with SQL Server. But it basically gives you it takes the results from two joins and actually collates them, and as opposed to what's the word I'm looking for? Instead of doing a straight up join where it takes records from A and then grabs little bits from B, it actually collates all the records together. So that row 1 would be from table A, row 2 would be from table B, row 3 would be from table A, row 3 would be, interleaves all the records, if I'm understanding it right. Supports the usual union, intercept, and accept. That's the usual stuff. All right, supports auto increment. Except in this case, that's being called auto increment. By the way, that's my MySQL syntax auto increment. That gives you an idea how old the slideshow is. I used to use MySQL in my course. Auto increment, now it's called identity. You guys know that as a big serial. And you just create table int identity, and basically it flags that int to be auto incrementing. Simple. Now, triggers. Microsoft SQL Server has two languages you can create your triggers in. Postgres has like 15. These guys have got 2. First one's Transact SQL. It's a shared language with Sybase. Sybase was bought out by SAP, I think it was, recently, in the last 5 years. Pretty sure. And there's a reason for the fact that they share a language. Way back in the day, we're going back 19 years, 20 years ago. The University of Waterloo had a database product, and it was known as Watcom SQL. Some of us that are older have heard the word Watcom. Watcom was Waterloo's computer department, and they had a series of products: Watcom Basic, Watcom Pascal. They had also something called Watcom SQL. And they decided, you know what? We want to make some money off this. So they stopped offering it to schools, and they said, we are selling Watcom SQL to whoever wants to buy it. Microsoft, back then, still had some limits on its budget. You know, it had limits on its budget. So they said, well, we want to buy, but not all of it. Sybase said, well, you know, we're a new database company, so we're a startup. Back when startups really didn't exist, but it was one of the very first startups. Said, we want a database, but we don't want to pay for the whole thing either. So Microsoft and Sybase said, you know what? Shake hands. And we will partner up and do this together. Bye-bye. That's okay. I know, the pants called you. Your pants called you. Also known as his wife. So what happened is, they said they partnered up. They said, okay, we'll buy it. Here's the deal. You get the Unix variant, we'll take the Windows side. Microsoft says we'll do the Windows side, the DOS/Windows side. You guys get all the Unix platforms, and we'll stay and play in our own little pens. What do you think happened at the very first release of SQL Server 5.5 and Sybase SQL Server 5.5? Nope. They both took up their knives and stabbed each other in the back. Microsoft released SQL Server for Unix. Sybase released Sybase SQL Server for Windows. Different UI tools. They were binary compatible. You could take the database files from one server and put them on the other and they'd work. They were identical products then. So, of course, that product actually had triggers way back then. And they had Transact SQL, so they shared the language. That's the history of why they have a shared language. Now they've done this, obviously. In 2005, though, Microsoft said, we love the CLR, the Common Runtime. So now you can create your triggers using C#. And you can use any DLL, any function, any program you create in Visual C++ and actually attach them and call it from your SQL Server. So you can create triggers that are insanely powerful that call the Windows API. Anything you can probably do in C#, you can probably do inside your SQL Server now. You can write all your inventory allocations with all the nice functionality of the .NET libraries behind it. You want to get your SQL Server to do a SOAP call to another server somewhere? It's about 20 lines of code. Hey?
Notice I call it.
Yeah. Or for those of you that played with the web, it's a JSON call. Off to the things that are. It was really cool when they did that. All right. Microsoft, I'm going to say this. They're in the middle of a competition on measuring their appendage. They say, we can hold the biggest databases. Theoretically, they can have a 524,250 terabyte database. So considering, you know, just this number alone is two 4 terabyte drives, that's a lot of drives. Realistically, is there such a thing? No, but that's their theoretical limit. Now they're busy saying, you know, we can have bigger data than you. They have an unlimited number of rows, duh. But there are some databases where there's actually a limit of how many rows you can have in a table.
Access.
And you can have, yeah, I know access, not the new one, the old one. The new one runs SQL Server behind the scenes. Up to 30,000 columns per table. Okay, let me put it out there. If you're putting 30,000 columns in your table, you're doing something wrong. But you can have 30,000 columns per table. Knock yourself out, denormalize to your heart's content. All right.
It's better than Excel.
Hey, it's better than DBase. 256 columns. Hey? I heard somebody say something.
It's useless, you can't work with 240.
256 columns? Oh no, that's all we need. Nobody will ever need more than that. Shit, who the hell needs more than that? All right, the interface. It has a rich and full GUI, except for the Express Edition. Express Edition is what they call a headless. It doesn't come with administration tools. You just go to the Microsoft site and download them anyways and use it. You just don't get it all together. And it has a command line client. Thus, you can open up the command line and actually type shit in if you want by hand. It's obviously very supported in Microsoft development tools. You want to create a C# app that talks to your database. You draw a little form, you drag and drop the connection, double click on the connection, you ask for the parameters, and bang, now you can create a grid in like 4 clicks. You haven't written a line of code yet, and you got data. It would be stupid if it wasn't that well supported. The GUI. Full GUI tools you'd expect, similar to the ones for pgadmin, just not ugly. It's full server administration backup. Anything you need to do with the server, except for very select tasks. As in, you have a corrupted file and you need to restore one file out of a backup, kind of thing. You can do everything else through the GUI. You don't need to go drop into the database. You don't need to create permissions or anything through the database. It's all done through the GUI. It has a database design tool. Do you want to create a new column? You can actually get it to draw the ERD for you and draw your drag and drop your connections, and it'll actually create your structures for you. It has an interactive SQL shell. That's like that SQL window with Postgres and pgadmin. Okay. Now that's all the good news. The bad news. And there's typos on this, and I know there is, and I've never gotten around to fixing them. Okay. They have 2 licensing options, per core or client licensing. And the Express Edition is free, but it's really limited. It allows you only like 3 databases or 5 databases and only 3 connections at once, kind of thing. And it actually limits the size of the database. So per core means how many cores in your processor. Client licensing means how many users are connecting. Centered edition, so that's the stickers, you know, you're going out and cough up your, you want to just get SQL Server for your department. Starts at $1,793 per core because it allows both licensing models. But you have to buy it as a quad core. So if you're going to buy it per core, that means you don't have to pay for every person using it. Unlimited number of users, but you have to buy 4 cores. $7,000 out of the box. Client licensing, on the other hand, if you want to go, it starts at $900 and then you pay $200 per person. By the way, if you do $900 and you think you're going to use $209 for, you know, it's a web server connected to it, so that's one client? No. You're not allowed to buy this version if you're going to use it with a web server. You got to buy that version. Or, you know, if this changes every 2 years, then at work we actually have a lawyer that will walk through our licensing options because they keep changing. Because we're a Microsoft development partner. So we actually have a lawyer going through all our rules to make sure we don't break the laws every couple of years. They have the BI edition. So that's the one for reporting. Only has client licensing. Starts out at $8,600 plus $200. That's my typo. $209 per seat. So the BI version requires SQL Server, Enterprise Edition. I mean the Microsoft Windows Server Enterprise Edition and it starts at $9,000 for the first seat. Keep going up from there. Mind you, with this one here, often you only have half a dozen users. It'll be like Crystal Reports or what used to be, and I don't know if anybody here remembers Cognos, but Cognos had a reporting tool, and their tool would connect nightly and extract records. So that's why they charge so much for the server, because there'd only be half a dozen agents connecting and extracting data nightly. Then there's the Enterprise Edition. This is the big boy version, right? This is the one that runs in a data center. It only has core licensing. That's $7,000 per core, with a maximum of 20 cores. So if you have a 20-core server, so dual core times 5 processors, or 2 processors with 5 cores, take your math, whatever way you want to do it, it'll cost $140,000 for that version. And that's Microsoft. By the way, if you noticed, I didn't put a pricing thing on Oracle's, because Oracle pricing is voodoo. Last time I tried to price Oracle for work, and then we gave up because we couldn't understand the pricing model. It was per megahertz of the core times the number of cores, with a factor of how much RAM you've allocated to the server, not how much RAM you're going to give to the server, plus how many hard drives in the server that are going to be used by the database server, plus whatever phase of the moon it is, I swear to God. Essentially, you had a better luck to figure out the pricing by sacrificing a chicken and dancing naked at midnight than guessing it right yourself. And in actual fact, I actually called up one of the Oracle salespeople once. I gave him a number of what I wanted. Then I took his number, hung up, and I called another VAR, and he gave me a different number for the exact same thing. And we're not talking, it wasn't like, $50 in the difference. It was like $3,000 in the difference. And they're all supposed to offer the same pricing. So that means that someone somewhere along the way punched in the wrong value into this magical application that says how much you're going to pay for it. Apparently it's gotten a lot better. Now you only need to give up a kidney to understand the pricing, but it's very, very expensive.
You have to run their application, send them a file, and send you back a code.
Yeah, and then you put the code key in your server, and your server now can only use the amount of RAM you've paid for, the amount of disk space you've paid for. You want to buy some more, you're paying full ticket price again.
And you can't move it to another server.
Oh yeah, that's right. It locks it down depending on what kind of server you have. It's brutal. There's a little tool you run, it gives them a hex code, and then they put in the key, and the key matches. So let's say your server blows up. Guess what's happening next? You're paying for a transfer fee. If I remember, the transfer fee is about $5,000. So you got a new server, and it's identical to the old one? Too bad, it's not going to work. It's awful. But Oracle's good at what it does. And Microsoft SQL Server, on the other hand, you take it, you uninstall, put it on the next one, done. As long as you're not running them at the same time, you're free to go. Now, here's the good news for you guys. If you guys want to play Microsoft SQL Server, you guys can get it through the electronic stuff. Well, it used to be DreamSpark. I don't know what you call it now, but there's
Online resources.
yeah, the online resources. You can download every version of SQL Server, and theoretically, you can set up a VM with Windows Server Enterprise and actually put in the Enterprise Edition in there. Let's see what happens. Do I recommend you playing with SQL Server? I would say yes, it's worth your while looking at it, just so you have a chance to understand the differences. It is very power hungry, just so you know. Those of you that have got lower end laptops or netbooks or Macs, there's no Macs in here, is there?
Good.
I'm not going to make fun of the Mac users.
Yeah.
But anyways, if you got a lower end machine like an HP, don't do it. Just make fun of HPs because I hate them. But yeah, but I would recommend that you guys give it a whirl just to see what it's like. Can I help you with it? A little bit. I haven't touched Microsoft SQL Server in several years. Because Postgres does everything we needed to do and it doesn't cost anything, so so yeah. All right, so what's going to happen next week? I'm actually going to stop the recording at this point, for starters.